Episode number 57, April Viczko.
All right, cut to edge of stage. Great. All right, color frost.
Check. 1, 2, 3. Check.
Stand by, please. Heads to half, heads out, letting cues 1 through 10, sound cues 1 through 10.
Welcome back to The Title Block, a podcast about Canadian theatre designers, their history, and their craft. And I am, as usual, your host, Michael Cruz. And this time I have an interview with the fabulous designer, April Viczko. Now, this is a bit of a diversion from my BC tour, but in this uncertain times in Alberta and Canadian theatre in general, I thought it was important to get this interview with April out sooner than later. You see, April's not only an associate professor at the University of Calgary and the former chair of drama, she's also a past president at the Associated Designers of Canada. She was leading the board through a large renegotiation of the contract with PACT and an upgrading of what are commonly called the minimum fee schedules. And the story she has to tell about how she got involved and modernized the ADC is an important one for all Canadian designers to hear. We, of course, speak about her design career as well, and as a member of the pivotal collection of design assistants at the Stratford Festival in the early 2000s that included Lorenzo Savoini, Dana Osborne, Michael J. Francesco, and Katja Hubacek. We also speak of a surprising apprenticeship that started her career and her return to the prairies where she was born and raised to teach design at the University of Calgary. Well, of course, she wasn't born and raised to teach design at the University of Calgary, but she was born and raised on the prairies, and she returned to, okay, you get it. Now, don't worry, there are plenty more West Coast designers to come, and I'll be putting out a bunch before the end of the year. Remember to check out the show notes at thetitleBlock.com, and if you like the show, please go to patreon.com/thetitleBlockpodcast and help support these efforts. Now, here is my explosive conversation with April Viczko. God, I have to stop watching design and build car shows on Netflix. April Viczko is a set and costume designer. Have you ever done lighting?
Yeah.
Okay, and lighting designer, triple threat. In theater for the last 25 years.
Something like that.
Since she left the University of Alberta with a BFA in design. She's worked across the country. She's originally from Saskatoon. And she's here in her office talking to me in Calgary while I'm out here doing some work for non-theater stuff. April, welcome to the Title Block.
Thank you.
That was the worst intro I've ever done.
It's the cold.
It is the cold, but I'm happy to have you here, and I'm happy that you allowed me to hang out with you
I'm glad.
Here at the University of Calgary. All right, so I did not realize you were originally from Saskatoon.
Well, small town outside of Saskatoon.
Okay, what's the name of the town?
Prudhomme.
Oh, Prudhomme, which I have heard of.
It's the birthplace of the first Lady Governor-General of Canada.
Oh, take that.
Madame Jeanne Sauvé was born in Prudhomme, Saskatchewan.
Nice. That's terrific. And then you somehow got involved in the theater. Mm-hmm. How did that happen? How did you get interested? What was your first experience? And why did you ever want to go into this crazy
My
business?
first experience in the theater, and I remember it vividly, was in school in Edmonton, because I was born in Edmonton when my family moved later to small town, right? So was seeing a show, and I don't know what theater it was. I was, maybe 7 years old, and I'm in the theater, and it was Beauty and the Beast. And I remember thinking, is that Rose real? And I remember thinking, how did they find the hairy guy to play the Beast? Like, where did he come from? So I had all these, and I wondered if people actually lived in those houses all the time. Like, how did they get their houses on stage? Like, the sort of townspeople.
Yeah, the fantasy was complete.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So that was my first experience that I know of in the theater. And yeah, then I've always been interested. I joined, in high school. I was part of the drama club and stuff like that. So, and then just I was bit.
And what you went to the University of Alberta in Edmonton?
Yeah,
right?
I started at the University of Saskatchewan for 2 years. And when I came back from Italy the first time I went, so I graduated from high school and went to Italy on student exchange, and then came back and went to the University of Saskatchewan, and I was enrolled in education because I was going to be a drama teacher. and because my family had convinced me that education would be a safer route, And then I took some theater design classes and prop building classes, and that was it. I knew this was me. And so then I applied to the BFA at U of A and got in and went.
That's great. What happened in Italy? What you're on exchange there? Were you just like touring and seeing museums and art and doing all that stuff, or were you doing anything specific?
I was on student exchange, so I did an extra year of high school. So I went right after grade 12, and I lived with a family with what was called Interculture Canada, and it was originally started by the American Field Service. And so it's called AFS, Interculture Canada. And it was a student exchange program that was created right after World War II to promote world peace and understanding. And so you live with a family for a whole year. So unlike a Rotary exchange where you live with a family for 3 to 4 months and then you move to another family, this one you live with one family for the whole year, and you go to high school and try and live like an Italian, or wherever you are.
Can I do that now?
I know. I'd love to do it. I'd love to do it again.
That'd be great.
It was a life-changing, you have to imagine I came from small town Saskatchewan, a little town of 200 people, and went to high school. My parents sent me to high school in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, where I, was Catholic, all girls, run by nuns, very sheltered kind of life. And here I taken off going to Italy and seeing art that I've never seen before in my life. And it turns out that the family I was living with, their daughter was going to art school, because their high schools are sort of streamed into these, sort of either trades or geography or classics or something. And so she was going to art school. So they said, well, we'll just send you to the same place. And so I took drawing classes for the first time. I took sculpture classes. I took architecture, and learned to speak Italian. Now I'm fluent in Italian, and I had a great time. Beautiful, beautiful experience.
That's incredible. And that will be a theme that comes back later in your training.
Yeah.
While you're doing your BFA in Edmonton, who were you working with? This was what year? Give us a
So I moved to Edmonton in 1995, and it was a 3-year BFA. So I did 3 years there, finished in 1998. So who was I working with? I went to school with Sherry Hoyles, and Georgia Lee was also in my class. And David Fraser was a year behind me, who is now production manager at ATP. And I did a lot of work then with Kevin Sutley, who I've done other work with since and continue. And JP Fournier was doing his master's then. He had sort of taken a break from his professional life and was doing his MFA. So I designed JP Fournier's master's thesis production when I was an undergrad. And who else was there? Bo Coleman I did some work with. How
about mentors?
David Lovett was teaching there at the time, and Lee Livingston.
Right. Oh, Lee Livingston.
Yeah.
Forgive my ignorance. Lee was from the U.S., right?
She isn't from the U.S. She's not. I don't think she's American, but she spent quite a bit of time in the U.S. working in the U.S.
Right. Okay. Anything? Are they still at Edmonton?
Lee's
David
still in
Lee?
Edmonton,
Yeah.
and David's retired since,
Right.
and he's still in Edmonton. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. There's just like a whole bunch of new names I don't know any about.
Yeah.
Great. And so you got through that, and then you just landed in Edmonton, and you're going to be a great designer. That's how it worked out, right?
Yeah.
That's how it always
That's
happens.
it. Life's over.
Yeah.
You do your BFA and career's over. No, so I decided I was going to go back to Italy. I was dying to go back to Italy. So it'd been 5 years since I'd been there. So I got a gig teaching English at a summer camp, just kind of, a thing you do. And so I went over to Italy, and then from there, kind of got the packed theater equivalent book of all the theater listings, right? And it's quite a bit thicker than the Canadian theater listing. It's significantly thicker. So sort of sussed it out and checked things out, and got to meet with a couple of designers, met with some who I wrote to La Scala. I wrote to, like, I just, I was so
As one
young and
does.
naive. I just,
Yeah, like, dear La
whatever.
Scala, please.
Yeah, dear La
hire me.
Scala, I'm from Canada
Yeah.
and I'm here in Italy and I would love to meet your designers. And it was really amazing how people or companies, this has happened my whole career, is that people respond to cold calling. And so they responded and said, oh, you should get in touch with these two designers. So I did. I sent another letter, and this was before email because it was 1998. So people were using email, but you weren't using email to look for jobs. That was like, nobody did that. That was an inappropriate way to introduce yourself. And so we sent letters. So I wrote more letters, and Ezio Frigerio got back to me. And he said,
I'm sorry, say that a bit slower.
Ezio
Yes.
Frigerio.
Okay.
Who's he's a kind of a renowned opera designer, and said, well, if you want to meet, I'll meet you at Scenotecnica Più when I'm in Rome. And I said, okay. And he said, I'll be there at the end of August. And I said, okay, I don't know if I'll be in Rome at that time. Well, he said, well, I'm not coming to find you. And I said, well, no, that wasn't the expectation, but okay. So I did manage to get to Rome when he was going to be there. And he said, so call Scenotecnica and just set up a meeting. So I did that. And I talked to a wonderful woman on the phone named Lorenza. And she said, so here's what you do. You go to the last subway stop going east in Rome and get on a bus that's going to Tivoli. And then tell the driver you want to get off at the Pentagon. Sure. So, and then from there, go to the gas station and call us from the payphone, right? Because nobody had cell phones. Nobody had. This
that's
was
nuts.
like before all that.
Yeah.
So, and she said, and someone will come pick you up. And when I think about it now, I think I would never do this. But at the time, I was 23. And what the hell did I have to lose? Nothing. So I took the train to the end, got on the bus, told the driver I want to get off at the Pentagon. Turns out the Pentagon is a furniture warehouse in the middle of nowhere, countryside Italy. And so literally there was the Pentagon, Il Pentagono, and the Agip gas station. And it was hot. It was so hot. Like, it was hot like your shoes were sticking to the pavement hot. So I walk across the parking lot and I go into the Agip gas station, which also has a bar and a hot food station in it because it's Italy. And
every gas station has a hot table.
yeah,
right?
like
why
it's
not?
like, you can get your peperonata and your pasta asciutta and your
Exactly.
espresso and your gas. So I called Scenotecnica and I said, I'm here. And they said, yeah, no problem. Somebody will be by to pick you up in a minute. Great. So how am I going to know this person? Who is this person? What? Nothing. Right. So anyway, a young woman, thank God, it was a younger woman, looked about my age, shows up in this like dumpy car and is covered in paint. Right. And I go, well, that's my people. Yeah. So, okay. So I get in the car and we drive to Scenotecnica's warehouse, which happened to be shared with Rancati, which was also the big prop house in Italy. And they did a whole bunch of swords. It was run by the Rancati family. And they did Titus for Julie Taymor. And they were this big prop house, right? Yeah. So I arrived in the middle of this. I'm not kidding you, Michael. It was a warehouse in a field. There was nothing. Yeah. Like, there was not, like, this could have been a serial killer scenario so easily. So I go into this room and they say, just wait here and Signor Friasconato will be with you in a minute. Yeah. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I'm waiting. And so I meet the sort of administrative head of this company and then meet Ezio Frigerio and show my portfolio and we get chatting and all that jazz. And he's looking at my stuff and I'm green. I'm like straight out of theater school in Canada, from Edmonton, talking to this highly cultured opera designer, and just being sort of, innocent me. And he says, well, if you want, you could come and assist me in my studio in Paris, but you'll have to get yourself there. And, I can give you a place to sleep, but I really can't pay you very much. And so there's all this chat going on. And he wasn't overly friendly. He was kind of cold, kind of standoffish. And so we leave it at that. And he says, so call me, I think it was October 1st or something like that. When I get back from my next gig, and then we'll sort it out. So fine. But then when he leaves, Mr. Fiasconaro, who's the son-in-law of Luciano Antonetti, who was the plaster man for all of Zeffirelli's films. Good. So he did all of the...
That's nuts again.
So Antonetti owns this company, Scenotecnica Più. It's his company. So they've done all of Zeffirelli's films. They do his operas. They do Hugo Deanna's operas. So they're a really amazing place. So from this sort of boring office that's in the upstairs of this warehouse, Fiasconaro takes me for a tour downstairs in the studios, and my mind, like my little 23-year-old head, like just explodes off my neck in front of it. Like I'm just losing my mind. So they have a team of 6 sculptors who sculpt in clay and in styrofoam, and they have a team of I don't know how many there were, maybe 8 carpenters at the time that were working on different films and opera projects. And their specialty was fiberglass scenery. So they do crazy things like drive the designer around and say, so what kind of rock do you want? You want this kind of rock, or you want that kind of rock? And you want how many olive trees do you want? And so they drive them around in cars, and then they'd go set up, and they'd basically paint latex on the side of a mountain, and then make a mother form out of wood and cover it with plaster, let it dry, cut it, bring it back to the studio, reassemble it, and then make the rock. So they'd make the positive and then make the negative, and then make the positive again out of fiberglass. And they would do this with sculptural forms. So I ended up doing crazy things with them, like every drawing had to be full scale. So everything had to be 1-to-1. So we would draw these crazy ornate moldings, or grapes hanging down on a thing, all full scale, and then give it to the sculptors, and they would sculpt it out of clay or out of styrofoam or whatever, and then again we'd cast it, and then I'd cast it again, and it would be made out of fiberglass and turned into scenery attached to flats. Or I would do plans of columns for the carpenters. Again, everything had to be 1-to-1, even if it was just 4 feet of straight line and then half an inch away and then another half an inch away. Anyway, but precision in scenic construction, that was phenomenal. And a group of really young sculptors, a fun team. And then upstairs in the office, they were also working on some 3D rendering and Maya and digital animation, which is really on the cutting edge of scenery, right? And this notion of scenery being also 3D digital. So this is my first exposure to 3D digital kind of, in 1998, right? And so it was fascinating. And I did things like one of my first assignments there was to go do some scenic painting out at the Villa Borghese Zoo.
Oh, come on.
So one of my first gigs.
The Villa Borghese is a brilliant manor museum filled with Bernini's.
I know.
There's his first sculpture, and then there's his last sculpture.
I know, and Canova, and beautiful, right?
Yeah.
So, but the zoo, there's a zoo right in the park. Yeah. So, I'm sent to the zoo with Piero, who they called Bambascione, and which is sort of means ragamuffin, because he was sort of this really adorable sort of teddy bear chubby Italian boy who was absolutely benign, right? Just the sweetest guy. And he and I were out there scenic painting in the heat of an Italian August, or I guess it was early September, and painting bamboo that was going to go behind the pandas that was, literally we had bamboo that had been tied together, and then they cast it out of fiberglass and this whole thing. So we were painting the bamboo and making these funny signs that had to go, and and so I kept having this surreal moments every now and then of thinking like, I'm in the Villa Borghese Zoo scene painting. And so the crew, the other carpenters who were there, so we ended up being Bumbashone and Bumbashona. And, these two chubby scenic painters who were having a good time laughing in the Villa Borghese Zoo.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's an incredible experience. Then it was over, right? Then you were there for a year.
Yeah, I was there for a year. So I went over without a visa. Right. I kind of was there for as long as it made sense. My ticket was going to expire. I knew I wasn't going to live in Italy for the rest of my life. And I had a great time. Yeah. So I just decided it was... Shanotechnic also went through... at that moment was, in between gigs. And so people were being laid off and, and you can't work illegally forever in a state like that. So I had to decide, am I going to try and legitimize this, or am I going to, and how long am I really going to stay? So I decided it was time to go home, and had been in Italy for about a year. And so I went home and stayed in Saskatoon and till I figured out my next move, which was Toronto.
Yeah, and tell me how you picked Toronto. Like, how did that happen? And what was the sort of the boot at the door, as it were?
It was literally like a boot at the door. Mm-hmm. So I'm staying at my mom's in Saskatoon because that was where home was. And, I'd been there a couple of months and I was trying to figure out what am I going to do next? And she kind of passed me in the hallway one day at home and she said, you can live in my house for as long as you want. But you can't stay, right? Like, you can't stay in Saskatoon. And so, because my experience had been bigger than Saskatoon, right? Like, I'd just come back from this amazing experience. And so I think partly she didn't want me to waste that, but also I had outgrown my spot in the world. And so I didn't really want to go back to Edmonton at that time, because I just felt like I'd just been to Italy. So I'm still adventure hungry. Yeah. And so I could have gone to Vancouver, I guess. I didn't know anybody in Vancouver. I knew one person in Toronto. And so my mom bought me a one-way ticket to Toronto. And I packed one suitcase of art supplies and one suitcase of clothes and moved to Toronto.
That's great. This was in 1999, I guess, right?
Yeah, it was late 99 when I went. That
would have been just before kind of the recession. No, it was a couple of years before SARS.
It was a few years before SARS.
A few years before SARS.
But it was kind of, it was an interesting, time because there was still a bit of upswing happening, right? And then I think the recession happened sort of in and around. But it, as a young freelancing artist, that the recession didn't impact me directly in that moment. So there was a lot of hustle, and I guess I had a lot of hustle. So I found gigs, and eventually I was interviewed at Stratford. Doug Perishchuk interviewed me there with Alex Dolgoy, and they didn't have a gig then, but if something came up, and then I was assisting Michael Levine because I called and wrote anybody anytime.
So back up a second. Tell me, you landed in Toronto and you had a meeting with the great
Chuck Homewood.
Right, at the ADC.
Yeah,
he was the executive director of ADC for most of the 90s, I think.
Quite a long time.
A long time, right? So tell me what you landed in Toronto. You went to see Chuck, and
so I landed in Toronto, and I called Chuck first, and on the phone he said, "Well, you should come down to the office and let's meet." And so I went down to the office and I brought my portfolio, and he's like, "You're not going to show me that. I don't know anything about design." He's like, "I just help designers. I don't." And so this is an interesting experience because I'd never I'd never met Chuck before. And he said to me, here's, again, best career advice ever. So he says, here's the membership book. Call everybody in the book. And I'm looking at him like, are you serious? Everybody in the book? And he says, yeah, and don't tell them you're looking for work. Tell them you're new to Toronto, you've just worked in Italy, and you really want to hear about what they're working on. So best advice ever, because people really responded. And, you hear those and they feel, I think when you hear them as a young person, they sound like cliches when someone says, oh, we should try and have something interesting on your resume that no one else has. So working in Italy was something no one else in my cohort at that moment had, right? So it was interesting enough that quite a few designers responded to my cold calls or my cold facts. Because again, this was before email was an appropriate way to introduce yourself. So I got one gig after another, and it just, so you start with one, and then I'd meet with another designer, and I see you brought your portfolio. Well, let's talk about you for a little while after we talked about all the things that they are working on. And, I don't really have a gig to hire an assistant right now, but maybe, so they get to know you a little bit. They get to like you. They take your CV away and eventually you get a call.
It is kind of like, it's not too fine a point to say that the way you succeed in theater is about fitting into a community and about being a member of that community, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like what you did was you met everybody and had a chat and were interested in their life, which is how you build friendships, which is how you build relationships. And you built community, which is a great way to enter the business, right? So that sounds like perfect advice. I can't believe, like, Chuck Homeward he's a dear. He's a dear man. And that was awesome advice.
And supportive of young people, right?
Yeah.
So that's again where I think, he could have easily said to me like, what are you doing here, kid? Like, you just came from Edmonton, Saskatoon, like, sure, get a couple gigs and give me a call, right? He could have easily have done that. And he didn't. He said, come on in, let me see your face, let me talk to you, and that was really remarkable.
That's awesome. And so Paul Matheson was the first person that actually hired you, right?
Yeah. So Paul Matheson hired me to go work on The Rape of Lucretia as his assistant lighting designer at the Old Du Maurier. And Astrid Jansen was the set designer. Right. And it was kind of a remarkable experience. I'd never done opera before. I'd never, and Ken Chan was the assistant production manager at the time. So I ended up meeting actually in that show quite a few people that I ended up working with again later, not knowing at the time, of course, as this business goes. You meet somebody and they're doing one job, and then you meet them later and they're doing another job, or you're doing a different job. So, and then Michael Levine responded to one of my, cold faxes, and he said, well, I'm not in Toronto right now. I'm in New York, but if you're ever down here. And then it turns out one of my good buddies from U of A, Georgia Lee, was down doing her MFA at Yale. Right. And so it was a great opportunity. Toronto to New York's not a big jump. And so I went down to stayed with Georgia and Connecticut and took the train in and, went to meet with Michael for a bit. And he said, well, yeah, you can come back in February and work for me for, I'll pay you in Canadian dollars and you can just come down here and hang out in the studio and do some work. Mm-hmm. So that was how I got working with Michael Levine. And then, and you get Michael Levine's name on your CV and people really go, oh, that must be a good assistant because, or that's somebody who can build a model because, so that went a long way for me.
And I mean, we haven't quite got to your first big design break yet. But was it after you went to Stratford? Or were you designing before you went to Stratford?
I was designing before. I had done a show in Peterborough. Randy Reed hired me to work for his
love
company.
Randy Reed.
For his company out in Peterborough.
Yeah.
And I guess that was about the same time I started at Stratford. I started at Stratford fairly soon after I moved to Toronto. So I was doing. So what ended up happening? It's interesting how I got my gig at Stratford too. That's a good story. So I'd interviewed with Doug and Alex, and they didn't have a spot, but they'd keep me in mind should something come up, right? And I'm thinking, who's going to give up a gig at Stratford? Nobody's going to give up a gig at Stratford. So it turns out somebody gave up an assistant gig because they decided not to come back or whatever. And so they were trying to call me, and this was, again, before cell phones. So I had a pager. And I'd had my pages. I'd called Bell and said, going to New York for whatever, 5-10 days or something like that. I can't remember now. And because I was going down to work with Michael. And so I hadn't received any pages while I was in New York. And I thought, oh, that's a bit weird, but whatever. And when I got back, I went to an internet cafe in New York City to check my email. And I had an email there from Stratford, from Alex, going, we're trying to get a hold of you. We've been paging you. We called your home line. We're looking for an assistant for a show. And I'm like losing my mind because now 5 days have gone by, right? And so I called Alex and I said, from New York, like putting the change into the machine. And I'm saying, yeah, of course I'm interested. Yeah. And she said, well, we didn't hear back from you, so we gave it to somebody else. We offered it to somebody else. And I'm going, I'm going to lose my mind. So I'm on the phone. I call Belle and I just lose my mind, right? I'm thinking, like, how could you've ruined my career. Like the melodrama of your, early 20s losing this has ruined your career.
Because you'll never get an offer from Stratford again.
No
right?
one's ever going to offer me another gig ever.
Yeah.
I'm such a goof up. I didn't get my page. Turns out they had rerouted my pages all to LA. So somebody in LA was getting all these pages. Yeah. And so I insisted that they write the Stratford Festival a letter explaining what had happened, that I was not an absolute fuck up. Right. And so I don't know if they ever did or not, but I was so heartbroken because I thought I'd missed my big chance ever. Yeah. And so Alex was so kind. She said, well, if they don't accept it, the offer, I'll come back to you. Right. And I thought, right. So I'm in my studio apartment in Toronto, just off the Danforth. And I'm reading Titus Andronicus in my apartment, weeping because I'm never going to get to do this show. But what if they call? Then at least I'll have read the play. But it's never going to happen. I'm so demoralized. And the phone rings. And it's Alex. And she says, so if you still want it. And so I got to go assist Charlotte Dean at the Stratford Festival. Nice. Yeah.
And it will come to no surprise to listeners of the Title Block that that not that first year, but the next year there was a turnover in the other assistants, and you started to work with. You were part of this team with Dana Osborne, Lorenzo Savoini, Michael Gianfrancesco, and
Sarah Armstrong, and Katka Hubacek. Yeah,
like all of which, every single one of you have sort of broken out into incredible. Very successful design careers from that cohort. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And we've spoken to Michael on the show. We've spoken to Dana on the show. We've spoken to Lorenzo. Sarah Armstrong is a friend, but I have not spoken to her on the show. Mm-hmm. She's working in film now.
Yeah.
Very successful. So that's crazy. Like that's an intense year working with such fantastic people. You obviously among them. What did you do at Stratford? Like how did you fare?
I think I fared fairly well in the sense I was with, it was a great group of assistants. I got to work with amazing designers, and I think that was so it was the year 2000 to I was there from 2000 to 2003. I took a break and then I went back for one more season. So I did 4 seasons in total over 5 years. And I met so many people that I made a lot of work with over the years. And I sort of look back on that time was a bit, it's kind of golden in its own way. Because I met a lot of designers that I then ended up with Astrid and who I didn't assist at Stratford, but I worked with later. And then, those young design assistants that we were at the time, right? They're now colleagues. They're always been colleagues and peers. And I admire the work that they're doing and where they've been and the successes, and had lots of phone conversations with Lorenzo, and haven't seen as much of Michael Gianfrancesco as I'd love to, but Facebook friends with Katja and all that stuff. So it's fun to see where everybody's gone and what we're doing. And there's some funny stories from those days of somebody from one opening night, we were all drinking in the design studio way late at night, and somebody spilt some coffee. It was somebody from admin who was visiting the design studio and spilt some coffee on Peter Hartwell's white card model. And it was literally like design assistant triage, emergency. Like, we all sobered up immediately. And Lorenzo running around going, get phone books. We need phone books. And Michael going, flatten it. And Dana getting paper towel, and we're stacking stuff on top of the, and knowing that Peter's going to lose it when he comes in the morning, and rightfully so to a certain extent. So, and he did. And, he's going on and on about our ineptitude and sort of, and finally I think I called him on it and sort of said, well, what would you have done? We fixed it at least. And I'm like, and you're going to paint it. It's fine. I've had great mentorship moments with Peter as well. Like, Peter Hartwell's, I would consider him a mentor for sure. And he sort of, one day looked at me and was like, you got a lot of tenacity. And coming from Peter, that's like high praise, right? So yeah, there's some pretty good, funny moments that happened.
Yeah, that's terrific. All right. So Stratford happens in many ways one of the centers of the theater universe in Canada. Mm-hmm. And then your first big A-house break comes not long after that, right?
Yeah, sort of in the middle. Yeah. And I was taking a year away from Stratford and was in Toronto and, gigging like we all do. And I did lots of corporate events. I worked with Brock Lumsden, who was a theater designer for a number of years, and just a really lovely guy. And, we used to laugh hysterically, and we still do. We're still really good friends at all kinds of gigs. And, I get a phone call out of the blue from Michael Levine saying, there's a designer friend of his that's fallen ill, and do I know Ken Garnham, and he can't finish the show in Calgary, and could you do it? And would you be interested? And I think you and Ken would get along like a house on fire. And and then saying, April, you need to call Ian Prinsloo. And so called Ian and then talked to Richard Rose. And I had just finished assisting on a show, 2 shows in 2 years that Richard was directing at Stratford, and so had taken over from Graham when his mother passed away. So Richard knew I was competent, and he trusted me to take the show from Ken and make it happen at Theatre Calgary. And so that was a big break for me. It's one of those instances where people say so many cliches, like, be ready. You never know when the call's going to come, and you're going to have to be ready to sort of like go to the next step or take the next gig. And so that's literally what happened. And, it was unfortunate circumstances, but it was an opportunity for me.
What was the show?
It was Fire.
Right.
With Jeffrey Pouncett and Mike Ross were playing the 2 lead roles.
That's great. I worked at George Brown with Jeffrey.
Yeah.
He was there back in the late 90s when I was working there as a designer.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. That's an awesome.
Yeah,
cast.
And it was challenging. It was my first time in an A house. And I was still a young designer. I wasn't, you earn your stripes somehow, right? We all do. So, and then Richard offered me a show at Tarragon the following season. So, and then that sort of, gets things moving along.
Yeah. And then you're already established in Toronto as a designer, but now you're working all the kind of like the A houses and not A houses, but A houses, the main producers of new works in Toronto, right?
Yeah.
Tarragon Factory.
Interesting work, right?
Yeah.
And working with, I got to work with Rosemary Dunsmore doing a few shows, some at one at George Brown, another one at Factory in the Backspace, and the usual, the circuit of contemporary theater in Toronto.
Yeah, exactly. And you also worked. You were at Casa Loma doing stuff? Was Brock doing stuff at Casa Loma?
No, it wasn't with Brock. Actually, I got the game.
And I'm just interested because it's Casa Loma, which is this giant, like, ridiculous mansion castle thing in Toronto.
Yeah. So every Christmas at that time, I don't know if they're still doing it. At that time, they were doing a Christmas pantomime-ish kind of kid show. And so one year, it was a company called Wolfworks that was run by a guy whose name I can't remember right now, but he hired a friend of mine who I'd worked with Brock at Fireworks Marketing Group. So Talia Rosales, who was a production manager for corporate gigs. And so he hired her to sort of work on this thing. And she said, what we really need here is a designer. And because we were friends, she said, you should come and do this Christmas gig. And so we went and did it, and we did crazy things. Like we not only did we do the pantomime, we then also agreed and like pitched this idea that we were going to do decorating in other parts of the castle. So we had like a Judy dress form that was like having Rigeline going all around it with fish line and these little birds. And we were there till like 3:00 in the morning, gluing at Casa Loma, thinking I'm going to be haunted by ghosts. Yeah. And I'm gluing, fucking little Tweety bird things to this bits of Rigeline and burning my fingers and thinking this is not worth it. Like, why on earth? And then the next morning going in and literally this is where children's theater, I just went, this is where the magic happens. Like, there were 3 little girls who might have been 5 years old sitting in the front row who just lost their minds when Cinderella came out in the, ball gown rented from Stratford for 3 weeks for, whatever, $40. And they just like changed how I saw the magic in that moment, right? With my burnt fingers and my up till 3 a.m. Can't believe I'm doing this shit.
Yeah, it kind of harkens back to your own first experience about how did they get all those houses on stage and who's that hairy guy? I know.
Totally.
It's like completely connected.
Yeah. And their, unfiltered response of like the magic of this, right? So we ended up doing the pantomime. Talia got hired again the next year, and we ended up doing the pantomime again and different kinds of decorations. We built this huge dinosaur tail in the pool. Do you remember the pool in Casa Loma? The unfinished pool?
This is the part where I admit that I've never been in Casa Loma in Toronto.
Oh, wow. Okay, so down in the basement, there's an unfinished pool.
Oh, God.
Okay. So it's just a cement pit,
right,
basically.
It's weird. Like it was never finished.
Never finished, with a graded floor.
Yeah.
So it should have had marble finishing and all that stuff, and it has this beautiful arcade of columns on 2 sides, right? And it's gorgeous, and it's like if you could vision it, but it looks like a dungeon because it's just bare cement, right? And it's dusty, and nobody goes in there and whatever. So we went in and built this giant dragon tail that out of chicken wire and muslin and glue, and we just built it in place. This giant dragon tail, so it looked like there was a dragon that was living inside this. Right? It was great. And the next year we had a huge giant dragon head that we built and had sort of like a silk tongue and flames inside of it and hanging. It was behind a scrim so it looked like, and camo net and stuff in front of it, right? And kids coming in and they couldn't see the dragon, and then all of a sudden, roar, and like the flashing lights and the tongue and so we had, there was some really fun fun kind of moments in Casa Loma.
That's awesome. Any secret passages that you found where you were Casa Loma?
No, but I ended up working with Larissa, who then became the producer of Theatre by the Bay in Barrie.
Right.
And later ended up working with her and Richard Rose again on a Shakespeare piece that they were doing up there. So it was one of those kind of funny connections.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, great. And then your career takes off. I mean, you've worked all over the country.
Yeah, I took a pause, right? I got to maybe 2005 and was feeling... what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't exactly burnout, but it was also like I needed a recharge in a way. It's grueling, as you know, right? The freelance gigging and sort of paycheck to paycheck. And I did some really interesting work with interesting people, and I don't regret any of that. I have arthritis, and so I found the physical challenge of, hauling those costumes around and, taking rabbit ears and bunny tails and stuff like that on the TTC. I paid a price for that physically, I think. And so I got to about 2005 and started thinking about what am I going to do next? What, kind of taking stock of a few things. And I had a bike accident. I think that actually was the thing that made me think, because I had to stop for a bit. I had fallen off my bike. My front wheel got caught in a streetcar track. And, classic.
That's the exact same thing happened to me in 2005.
Really?
Yeah.
At college in Dundas when it was like...
It was on Queen Street. I was working at YPT and I was cycling to the factory to do a call. I had come back from paramedic school and I was working in town pulling gigs and I broke my hand.
I broke my left wrist.
That's crazy. I broke my right fifth metatarsal.
And weren't you glad a streetcar wasn't coming?
There are no tarsals.
Are you a doctor?
I'm a doctor. In your hand, they're called carpal bones, not tarsal bones. I broke my fifth metacarpal on my right hand. Yeah, in a streetcar track, in a bicycle. I punched a cab, basically like, and I did one of those. It's not fun.
No.
It's dangerous.
No, so I went over the handlebars.
Oh, no.
Because my front wheel stopped, and I went over the handlebars. And thankfully, there were TTC workers who saw the whole thing happen. Yeah. And thankfully, there wasn't a streetcar coming. And some good Samaritan in a white car, don't know his name, don't know anything, pulled over, helped me get my bike to the side of the road, and like smashed a whole bunch of like, I don't know, Harvey's napkins on my face to like staunch the bleeding. I ended up with stitches above my eye. And so I had to take a break and a pause and couldn't really... I was on my way to be interviewed for a film and to work in the art department because I was an apprentice member of the DGC, and I couldn't do the gig because I was injured. And and while I was having that pause and thinking about, okay, so what am I going to do now? And when and I was assisting Danny Lynn, at the COC, and I was assisting on 2 shows with the COC. So we were doing Macbetto and Rotalinda. So that was sort of in that time frame. And I thought about going back to grad school. And so U of A took me and I went and I moved to Edmonton in 2006 to do an MFA.
And it certainly has paid off because you're now working.
It paid off because now I'm chair of drama at the University of Calgary.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. But let's just look at some of the highlights here from the past 15 years after you did your MFA. Because you worked with a bunch of terrific companies across Canada. You were at the Globe in 2007.
Yep.
I love the Globe. Working with Jeffrey Why Not, who is awesome. Workshop West. So this is all in the West because you were out. You had moved. Did you move out to Alberta then after you did your MFA?
So I moved to Alberta in 2006 to do an MFA there, and so I graduated from my MFA in 2008. So I was working a bit while doing my MFA as well. So I went out to the Globe I did a couple of shows with the Globe in that time period. Then worked with Workshop West on new pieces, obviously, and was on their board for a year, and then I got the job in Calgary, and so then moved to Calgary. So after I think I was in Edmonton for about 4 years, and sort of 2 years doing an MFA and 2 years freelancing, taught sessionally with U of A at the same time as working. I got lots of work in Alberta when I got back. Worked at the Citadel, Shadow Theatre, and did some shows with my good buddy Kevin Sutley with Kill Your Television. And Alberta's been really good to me. And so then when I moved to Calgary, since I've been in Calgary, I've been here 9 years now. And I've worked with Alberta Theatre Projects and Theatre Calgary, primarily, I'd say, those two companies, and Vertigo Theatre. And I've had a great time with all of them, you know. So Calgary's been good to me too.
I'm constantly impressed by the open arms that Albertan theatre has for people from outside. Now you're born in Edmonton, grew up in Saskatoon, but I did the Black Rider back here in 2004, and it was like I was from here.
Yeah.
Everyone was it wasn't like Toronto at all. Which it can be very difficult for people coming into Toronto from outside to sort of break into that kind of cliquey, you know, part of it's because of competition, but it's also
I found Vancouver harder though.
Yeah. That's not surprising.
I've done some work in Vancouver, mostly corporate work, but even trying to, you know, while I was there, and I'd spent months there at a time or weeks at a time trying to get in, and so I did do some theater in Vancouver with I'm going to blank on their name, Barb Tomasic, directing a piece by Tracy Power, and Back to You, and then that toured around a bit. Went to PTE after we did 3 stops somewhere in the Vancouver area. And then, but Vancouver was a harder scene. For me, I found it a harder scene to sort of break into. And I don't, it wasn't hard. It was harder than Toronto. And maybe I also was, had a little less hustle than when I moved to Toronto, right? And I was really hustling.
I also think there's probably less work in Vancouver than there is in Toronto. Fewer people there's like, at some point when I came to Toronto in the early 90s, there were something like 100 producing companies in Toronto. And I mean, some of them were small, some of them were big, but there was always something you could do. Yeah. And in Vancouver, I think the market is smaller. And I think especially after the recession in the early 2000s, people were much more protective.
Well, I especially think after the Playhouse closed. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I also think, like Vancouver, the theater community is smaller, but it's, what else are you going to do in Vancouver? You can do so many other things than go to the theater, right? Like you can be out late or be up early cycling or mountain climbing or, you know, doing all kinds of great outdoor things. Whereas in Toronto, well, what the hell else are you going to do in the wintertime?
You could ride the Vomit Comet at 3 o'clock in the morning coming back from the bar. That's always a good time.
You could be at Betty's until who knows what time, right?
Come on. Back in the day of the booze can. Oh, those are the days. I'm sure booze cans still happen, but I don't go to them. Let's look at things that you did that got some awards. So The Last Days of Judas Iscariot by Birdland Theatre, working with David Ferry, who's a personal favorite of mine. Yeah. Tell me about that show. That was in the Tank House, like just in the middle of the renovation. This is the distillery district.
It was after I'm pretty sure it was after the renovation. Okay. It wasn't converted into a theater.
No, you're right. Yeah, it was just prior.
So it was empty, but they had poured. It had a level floor finally, because the first time I had seen the Tank House, they hadn't poured a new floor into it, and I know it had the new floor by then, like the laser leveled concrete floor. Because I know why. Because I had worked with Astrid Jansen on the film in there before the leveled floor.
So let's just back up and talk about that. That was Shadow Pleasures.
Yes, handwriting into dance.
Tell me about that experience, because that's film.
Yeah,
but it was with Veronica Tennant. It was dance, right?
It was dance for camera. Yeah. So Veronica had this idea to look at 5 pieces by Michael Ondaatje, and some of them were pieces that were already created, and then she was going to shoot them on film and create a film of dance on camera with Michael Ondaatje's work. And so Astrid was hired as the designer, and she asked if I would assist her, and I said, yeah, sure. So Astrid and I spent that summer in her car. We spent so much time in her car driving around looking for stuff or collecting stuff and bursting out into like laughter hysterics in tears, laughing so hard, usually at about 3:00 in the afternoon when we were like desperate for food or a coffee or something. And we worked with, can't remember his last name, Mario, who was our prop guy. So it's basically the 3 of us, and then, I don't know, on any given day, 3 to 6 PAs, doing everything.
That's a bit nuts.
We were the art department. So it was an indie film, right?
Yeah, sure.
And, and silly things. So we shot one dance piece, with Andrea Nan was in the distillery tank house. That was the day that the blackout happened, and of course the grips were running around saying, "Oh, it's the art department. They covered up all the exit signs, and so now the power's got out." And it was like, no, the power's out on the entire eastern seaboard. I don't think it had anything to do with us. And then the next piece was shot at the what's the name of it right now? I'm blanking on the name of the theater, but it's the ballet schools theater.
Oh, the Betty O.
Yes, the Betty O. Thank you. There was an O in it. And so we shot there, had to fill it, create a sand pit with water and rain on stage. And so trying to coordinate with the grips, using some of their grip stands to connect this Lee Valley system that I'd borrowed from Ray Salverda to attach to this thing and make it rain. And they were like, why didn't you just rent the movie gear? And I said, because we can't afford the movie gear. So we're going to do it this way. And I'm soaking wet, and we have a generator running the power because, only emergency services were supposed to be going to work. Right. And so, of course, the film was shooting. And, it was crazy times, but great times. And Astrid won the Gemini.
Yeah, that's nuts. I was on a beach, by the way, when that happened. I was down in Port Stanley.
It's one of those like 9/11. Where were you on 9/11? Where were you at?
I know. We had an opening night.
Where were you during the blackout?
Yeah, I was at an opening night for Fingers and Toes, a musical theater. I think I've talked about this on the show. And Fingers and Toes, a musical theater production of something. It was really fun, actually. It was lots of fun. We were doing a little tour, and it was like a little review. And I got woken up and, there's no show tonight because the power's out, so we all went to the beach. It was delightful.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, exactly. It's the best opening night ever. Let's talk about the Judas Iscariot show. So David Ferry, this was a build your own space kind of thing, because there was no grid or power there yet.
Yeah. So Glenn Davidson was doing the set, and Glenn and David co-designed the lighting, which was all. Lots of it done by the cast with flashlights and water bottles, and there were desk lamps and things like that. And I was doing the costumes, and none of this is sour grapes, because I am really grateful for having done that piece, and I learned a couple of professional lessons on that show, one of them I was one of the young designers who had signed on with Christopher Banks earlier in my career than others, right? And he said to me when I signed on with him that you're the first young designer in 9 years that I've signed on, and that worked out great for me because I got lots of gigs that I think I wouldn't have because other more senior designers turned them down or something, and so Chris had a line on them, right? Judas Iscariot, I can't remember how it came to me. I think I met with David and we had an interesting conversation, and we liked each other well enough, and he hired me to do the gig. And it started out as a workshop. And I remember not having, it was like a letter of agreement, not a formal contract or anything, because it was going to be a workshop. And then performances were added so that the DORA committee could come. And then the DORA committee was coming, but the budget wasn't increasing. And so it was kind of one of those where, you just go along for the ride, right? And so because it was going to be a workshop production, neither Chris nor I at that time worried about the billing. So, wait for this one. So, get my coffee, my whatever, and I'm heading down on the subway. And I see on my way to rehearsal these giant subway posters. And in like 12-inch tall letters, directed by David Ferry, set design by Glenn Davidson. Yeah. And at the very bottom of the poster, about half an inch tall, is costume design by April Viczko and sound design by Nicholas Murray, I think his last name was. And I was so hurt. But I was also really angry. Part of the anger was because I was so hurt. And I didn't know what to do, So I called a couple of mentors and said, like, what the hell do I do? And one of them said, you have to leave the show. There's just, like, how can you, you've got to leave. And then another mentor, Astrid Jansen, actually, sat down and she said, we were having lunch, and I said, I don't know what to do. And she looked at me and she said, you do your job and you get the DORA nomination. That's what you do. And it was a gig with, really great name actors. It was a good show, right? It was a really good show. And so that's what I did. I just did my job. And she was like, your career has to be bigger than your billing, and this will be one show, but it was a good lesson for me in terms of, show going from workshop to production to, oh my God, the DORA committee's coming. So that's for me, when people talk about, Judas Iscariot, it was a fantastic show and it was magical. It was one of those shows where, as a costume designer, often opening night happens and I'm on to the next gig. Sure. But even though I was on to the next gig, I was at every performance. Right. Because you just wanted to be in the room. Yeah. Yeah. Because it was magic. Yeah. There was magic. And, David managed to create an atmosphere of magic in that show. Yeah. And, I don't regret a minute of that.
That's a great story. I think it's interesting that, in other businesses, it's all about the money. Yeah. I mean, it's not all about the money, but you're you're compensated, and there's a certain expectation that you get paid a certain amount of money, and whether there's a contract or whatever. But in theater, where there's so much more on the line, your reputation, your name, people are looking at your art and commenting on it, reviewers, billing is it's a personal thing. It's a personal thing, right? We take it very personally, even though, the audience may not worry about it. But I mean, all the fights that I've heard about through the design forum, and through people's past experience with companies that have been bad. It's all about billing that left me off. This notice that left me out of the program, left me out of, I wasn't billed the same as the director. And it seems like such a petty thing, but you don't have, there's nothing else. I mean, you're doing the work, but as far
if
as
you don't get the
compensation,
credit, it's really, and what I guess was painful about that experience for me was that somebody made that decision, right? Yeah. Somebody said, yeah, it's okay that we're giving this person, that we're giving the set designer bigger billing. And by bigger billing, I mean, 11 inches of space on a subway poster, better billing, right? And that was, it's probably the most extreme example I've ever heard in Canadian theater, around of bad choice in how they treated the designers on that billing clause.
I always found it, I don't want to go on too much about this, but I always found it interesting that, you talk to people who do marketing, they go, but the poster's only so big, the postcard's only so big, I can only fit so much information on it. You're like, well, film does it. Film puts 20 people at the bottom of the thing, including the production manager and the, and the location manager, all that other stuff.
I spent a lot of time in my time with ADC, I spent a lot of time on the contracts committee. And then also spent, I was the lead negotiator on the last version of the contract. And we spent a lot of time on that billing clause. And, the new billing clause, I think, is exceptional compared to what we've had in the past, recent past. And part of the conversation across the table with PACT is simply going, you need to give recognition to these people. And so, and they go, and where we're winning now is that a lot of the marketing isn't on paper. And so it costs them nothing. It costs no more. And with digital printing, it's not like the old days of somebody had to be there to letter set every single letter on the printing press. We're talking, it's a matter of points, and it's a drop-down menu on the computer, and it's an easy choice. So, but with websites now, it was a real battle to try and get us on websites. And so now it's in the clause. They have to do it. Yeah. And so end of story, just do it. Yeah. And, so where there's no character limitation, the designer's name must appear if the director's name is there. Yeah. End of story. Done.
Just do it.
Just do it.
And it shows that you're thinking about the design team that's creating the visual picture, right? Okay, so we're about to take a break, but I want to cover a couple more things that were award-winning in your thing, because I think it's interesting to talk about some of these shows. Let's talk about Hello, Hello.
Oh, Hello, Hello. So Hello, Hello was my first opportunity to work with Kill Your Television. Mm-hmm. I had worked with Kevin Sutley going to school with him. And it was my first time working on a Karen Hines piece. And when I worked with Kevin, we came up with this theory of working together when we were in school, and I'd kind of panic about what he was going to think and and he'd say, everything is shit until we decide it's not, April. Everything is shit till we decide it's not. And so that really, that actually was a gift, because it sort of freed me up to sort of just throw stuff at him and hope, until we decided it wasn't crap. Yeah. It was good. So that's how Kevin and I work. We just keep throwing ideas around at each other and make it work. So we decided in the end that we were going to put Hello, Hello in a Gap ad. And so it was in this white box, with a white little runway that jutted out over the edge of the stage, and everybody was going to be in stylish shades of gray. Right. And that's how we did the gig, and it was great. And I thought it looked beautiful, and it was a really well done production. And then Karen Hines actually saw that production, and really liked it. And so when she was doing drama at ATP, I got to be the costume designer for drama. a pilot episode, which is a fantastic play that Blake Brooker directed. And I think it was I'm a big fan of Karen's writing, but and she and I think see costume design in a very similar way. And so that was really rewarding to sort of see that payoff later. And then I worked with Kill Your Television on Victor and Victoria's Terrifying Tale of Terrible Things, which was co-written by Nathan Kakao and Beth Graham. So Beth I knew from my U of A days as well. We were at school together, and Nathan I met through Kill Your Television. And that little play, this little Fringe play. So I tell my students, don't do Fringe unless you really like the people, because Fringe is too hard. It's too hard to do Fringe unless you really like the people you're working with. So I did a Fringe gig with Beth and Nathan and Kevin, and just doing this little one-off thing, thinking whatever's going to happen, right? And it's a story of these twins who love scaring each other, and they tell each other spooky stories. And it's a really inventive and imaginative kind of play. So then it goes to New York City, and then it's been across the country. It's been to Calgary. It's been so it kind of took off and had its own life. This show of little twins.
Yeah. That's awesome. You got a Sterling nomination for Garage Alec with my personal hero, Ron Jenkins, who we've interviewed on the show.
Oh, really?
You did, yeah. I was like, I need to talk to a director about design. And I like hanging out with Ronnie, so let's have a little conversation with Ron Jenkins. So so people can find that in the list. But any rememrance about it was what's Village Theatre?
Garage Alec was Village Theatre with Tracy Power and Brian Dooley had their company, and they produced Garage Alec. And Garage Alec was half in English, half in French. And it's about this young woman whose car breaks down, and she's in the middle of Quebec, and she goes to this mechanic's place, and he doesn't speak English and she doesn't speak French, and they kind of make this thing work to get her car fixed and get her back on the road. So we did that one, and it was funny when I love working with Ron Jenkins. We've done a few things together. First, I worked with him first while I was doing my MFA on What the Butler Saw. Yeah. And I did costumes for that show. And Ron has amazing timing. Yeah. And then, so I worked on Garage Alec with Ron, and then I did True Love Lies at Citadel with Ron. And what I love about working with Ron is he makes my work better. Right? So Ron's not afraid he's never an asshole about it. He just looks at you and goes, this isn't working. And you go, yeah, it's not working. And sometimes you can go to Ron, I don't know, on True Love Lies, the dress didn't get a laugh. The dress is supposed to get a laugh. And we thought it was the funniest thing. And we thought it was perfect. And, first preview, no laugh. Right? And I'm looking at him at the note session after and going, I don't know why that dress didn't get a laugh. Like, do you know why this dress didn't get a laugh?
Can you give me a bit more context? Like, what's supposed to be funny about it?
So it's supposed to be funny. The daughter comes down in this dress that she's going to go out in, and the brother's sort of like, oh, it's not your nipples, your areola are showing, and you're, like it. So it's got to be the right dress. It's slightly trashy, but. And there's got to be a way into it. So it's got to be, and the mother goes, you're not going out in that. And she's like, oh, yes, I am. And so, but it didn't get a laugh. And it should get a laugh. The minute she walks out, there should be a laugh. And we didn't get the laugh. And so looking at Ron and going, I don't know why that dress didn't get a laugh. And he's like, thank God you said that. I was worried about what I was going to say to you. And I was like, what? That the dress didn't get a laugh? Like, that was so obvious. So, but I don't think every director, you wouldn't have the conversation that way. No. And so I think what's exciting about working with Ron is he's not afraid to push and push and push and push and push until it is so good that you can't even imagine how good a work you ended up doing. Like you just go, and that happened on Garage Elect. Like the set was not working. And it was an indie show. We had, and we didn't have enough money and so finally Ron just looks at it and goes, April, we're just going to cover the whole thing in that corrugated tin. And I'm like, oh my God, we don't have any more money, but that's a brilliant idea. And he goes, okay, how much more money do we need? I'm like, $500. He's like, let's do it. So we go over to Brian and Tracy and we're like, we need $500 more. And he convinces them that's a great idea. And so they do it and we do it. Yeah. And we're all there till way too late figuring this out. And when we got the Sterling nomination, I called him and I said, can you believe that got nominated? And he said, well, no, actually it looked really good in the end. And I said, it was an act of desperation, not a design. And he just howled on the other end. And he was like, yeah, but it was brilliant. So it was kind of one of those, moments of, I guess it paid off at the end. One of that, but yeah.
Hi there. Yeah, I know this interview is going really well, but before you skip ahead, just shuffle over to the show notes if you could and click on the link to the Patreon page for the title block. It does cost money to produce this time capsule of theater design history, and for a couple of bucks an episode, you can ensure that I can continue to put out great interviews with designers like April Viczko. Go to patreon.com/the title block podcast and donate now. Thank you for your help. Great. So we've talked about most of. First of all, I have to stop saying great, but moving on. Great. So now we have to talk. We talk about a couple more things, and we'll talk about the ADC. True Love Lies, awesome. Ash Risen.
Ash Risen.
Because we haven't talked about ATP, and we haven't talked about ATP on the show a lot. So, what was your experience working with them? And Ash Risen got a Betty nomination. So that's pretty great. It's a musical.
It did. It's a rap musical.
Awesome.
That was written by Michael P. Notley. Oh, I might have that wrong. And Kyprios. So, wow, that was a challenging one in some ways because it's a rap musical with a whole bunch of white people in it that, I think even now, only 5 years later, would be cast differently. Right. Maybe not. And this was one of those ones where, the whole design team goes out for dinner during Tech Week, and we realize, oh, we're all doing a different show. Right. So the conversation with the playwright and director for one designer was quite different than the conversation with other designers. And so, we were all kind of doing a different show and it showed. But I think the concept of the musical and, it was directed and co-produced with Patrick McDonald and looking at with the Green Thumb Theatre. And so it was meant for youth. And for that, I think it was still a really good message and a really great concept. And I thought Kyprios's music was really well done. But it's interesting working on playwrights and the Playwrights Festival. It was an interesting experience. I mean, I grew up in my, university days hearing about playwrights at ATP and the national, and the Blitz event and, all that stuff and knowing about that, throughout your theater career. And then finally getting an opportunity to design costumes for playwrights was really exciting. And working on those shows in rep. So I wasn't a stranger to rep because I'd worked at Stratford and had seen how that machine can kind of work. But designing for multiple shows in the rep situation and with quite limited budgets, because they're new plays, they can change overnight and you would be given like wild times of like, you'd walk in and there'd be a new script or a new version of, or, oh, sorry, we eliminated that scene, we're putting another scene in. So you have to really, as a designer, especially a costume designer too, you have to be really flexible, which means you're always kind of holding a piece of the budget back because you don't know when the next exciting idea is going to come out of the rehearsal hall, from the playwright or from the director or things like that. So,
which means that your other ideas are kind of half realized because you're kind of like, is this one going to get cut?
Yeah.
How can I design this to make sure I can change it?
Yeah.
So it's not, yeah.
Yeah, and you're always thinking about, and Vanessa Porteous was the artistic director at the time, and she always described it, and maybe others have as well, but I heard it from her in terms of it's the best first production of this play that we can do, right? And so the pressure wasn't there for it to be, the most perfect production of these plays, but the best first production that we can do, given the context of the festival and the resources and the, and sort of being there at the end, what turned out to be the end of Playwrights Festival, it was also interesting because it was showing its, how it had become formula, right? How certain things had become sort of formulaic in a way that you wouldn't expect a new work festival to become, right? And so it had run, you were seeing a festival that had a notion that had kind of run its course, because of course when the festival was created, not everybody was producing new Canadian work and putting it on a stage the size of the Martha Cohen. So, it's been interesting watching ATP recently. It's going through a lot of changes. So then I worked on the season after Playwrights as well and did Butcher with Wayne Magesha. And, that was a really good, I thought it was a very solid production.
Yeah. That's awesome. Great. I think that you've, in the last couple of years, you've done another Kill Your Television show, R&J, which got another Sterling nomination. And I think it's remarkable, or not remarkable like outstanding remarkable, but it's good to remark upon the fact that you've built relationships with people, and the ones that you've built the strongest relationships with, you're producing some of the best work, right?
Yeah.
And that's a good kind of career goal, I think, for people who are just starting at the career listening to the show. Okay, so you just spoke with whom I hear is a fan of the show, Natalie Riwa.
Yes.
Author of Scenography in Canada.
Yes.
Whew, got the title right, thank God. And who's from Queens.
Yes.
She just spoke to you about this great production you did at Banff. I was just in Banff on Friday.
Wow.
Let me tell you, never been to Banff before, never driven into the mountains before. I'm just going to do a little digression here. I was on the phone with my friend Shauna Miller, who's the technical director at YPT in Toronto. And she was on the phone with me when I saw the first mountain, and I almost lost the plot in the car. It's like, Shauna Miller, they're giant. They're huge. I feel so small. And they keep getting bigger. I can't believe this. This is why people go to Banff and don't come back. Anyways, you were in Banff.
So I was in Banff. So I did my first residency at the Banff Center in June. And I got to work with the fantastic Kendra Fanconi, who I hadn't worked with before, and I don't know where she's been all my life, but I'm so glad I found her. And we worked on this piece. So her company's called The Only Animal, and we worked on a piece called Slime, written by Barney Laverly. And we I sort of said to Kendra, well, I think, the piece was about these young people slightly into the future who could speak animal languages. And so there was no difference between human language and animal language. We were fluent in, so these young actors spent quite a bit of time learning and listening to seal sounds and cormorant sounds and other animal sounds to really be able to sort of create these languages, right? And so they had workshopped this piece quite a bit before I came on board. And I was, a local designer that she'd heard about, Kendra had heard about, and, we spoke on the phone and we liked each other, on the phone. And so she looked at my work online and she took the risk of, sure, let's have you work on the show in Banff. So what we ended up doing is so exciting. And I'm still processing this 3-week experience that I had. Patsy Thomas is probably the best head of wardrobe in the country. And I don't mean that disparagingly to any other head of wardrobe I've worked with, but Patsy is a remarkable individual in terms of her skill set and her understanding of how a wardrobe can work and how you can support the designer and the production and the vision all together and manage the budget and all that jazz. And she puts together great teams, right? Judy Dowrow's been working with her too for a number of years, and Judy is a powerhouse talent in terms of cutting and all of that, and really understands the human body in that sense. So here are this dynamic team, powerful team of wardrobe, and then there's the beauty of working at Banff in the summers. There's this army of interns and young people who just really want to hone the craft, right? And so wig and makeup and working with Laura Lee and that whole team, and Elijah and Matt in lighting. And so I got every department working on wardrobe in costume. So because we were working with high technology, so we were creating the illusion of animal and technology pieces being hybrid human bodies. And so there were fish scales that were built onto painted, so the scenic painters actually painted the bodysuits with fish scales on them onto net that were then sewn to custom fit the body. And then we had fiber optic panels sewn into the back of a costume, wired by the production team and some of the lighting team, figuring out how we're going to pack these batteries into this costume. And, of course, the fiber optics has no stretch and all kinds of problems, but all kinds of interesting problems to solve. And we brought the 3D printer. I took the 3D printer from here and loaned it to the Banff Center because we didn't have one in the theater department there yet. Theirs was still coming. And so we were 3D printing costume pieces. We also sampled printed chainmail because we were there, right? And we did really created a moment in that 3-week space of an idea to me of what the wardrobe of the future looks like, where there's not only fabric and textiles and hand drafting costume pieces, but there's also technology and lighting and manipulated sound that can come out of, or headdresses made of feathers that have lights in them that the actor can control by movement. And some of it was really successful, some of it was less successful. And what was beautiful about that was that Kendra was game for the ride. So I think that right now is what is holding Canadian theatre back from embracing technology, is that in a real sense of, you need a creative team that's willing to take the risk and also willing to say, that's not working. We love the idea. We're going to shelve it and then carry on and do the show. But we're going to try it. Right. And so the beauty of working with The Only Animal is that they love prototypes and they love stuff that's half built. Yeah. And Kendra doesn't mind trying it out in rehearsal and making the time for you to take your 15 minutes to just see if this is going to work. And so that was amazing. That to me was, like I said, I'm still trying to figure out what happened, but it was an impressive experience.
Sorry.
And could it be done anywhere other than the BAM Center? I don't know. It took a lot of resources. It took a lot of investment, but it also took that technical team that was willing to say, well, let's try it, and they weren't, there was less proprietarism in terms of, well, I'm also a prop and I don't build props, that kind of closed-mindedness that can get in the way of really trying something new.
It is kind of so. I have a couple comments. This idea that the ideas are collectively owned is a really important one. And again, we've spoken about this on the show a number of times about ego and how it enters the show and how it can drive some things that maybe aren't the best for collaborative work. But I'm just doing, from my own experience right now, I'm just doing some team exercises here in Calgary with my medical training, trying to work, because it's for many years, forever, it's been a hierarchical approach where you've had like a physician or physicians at the top, and then you've had, the bedside nursing, and then you've had RTs, and the team has been very top-down led. And now, because of patient safety and because of better patient outcomes and no idea is wrong and one person can't know everything, the hierarchy's been flattened. Yeah. And it's about just like keeping the goal in mind, which is, in my case, keeping this patient alive. In your case, is creating art that has a specific message.
Yeah.
And the idea of breaking down those barriers and having everybody work towards a collective end and letting your egos aside sounds like a much better way of working, right? And you produce a product that is...
And a healthier way of working.
Oh, it's way healthier.
I think, and I have to say that the whole creative team on this show, right? So James Coomer doing sound and Shizuka Kai doing these amazing props that were, part puppet, part but made out of garbage bags, and right, making a polar bear kind of, and out of plastic, and these really beautiful pieces of recycled art, and then the lights as well, and working with the designer to try and figure out, okay, well, how much light can we have, and when does the UV paint going to show, and how does it help me here, and at some point going, that's beautiful. And I remember days of being in the theater early in my career too, of thinking, and in Toronto, in a particular kind of scene where there's lots of egos in the room, and people being afraid to tell each other it's beautiful. You didn't want to make a comment because, heaven forfend, you comment on somebody else's work, even if you were making a compliment.
Or maybe it wasn't done yet. And you're like, well, that's great. Oh, that's not what you're going for.
Yeah. Right? So we're, those stunted creative times where you are afraid to engage with your collaborators, and in a way it's impossible to call them collaborators when you're not able to even say, you know what, that's really beautiful. And so, yeah, I don't know if it comes with maturity or if it's just about finding the right creative space. And I think there's also something about, I'm in love with the millennial generation. I know lots of people who aren't, but I really am, because I do think they're shrewd negotiators, but they're also really, they have an egalitarian aura about them in many ways that sort of will allow collaboration to happen. And so I'm hopeful.
That's awesome. Okay, the other questions I had was about the way, like craftsmanship, and how it intersects with technology. Another theme of the show, how do you get somebody how do you make chainmail if the last person who knew how to make chainmail has retired? How do you get extraordinary jewelry when you're not training new jewelers to work in the theatrical style. Is that now irrelevant if you can, as a designer, make a 3D object, print it? Like you're saying, can you print chainmail that's interlinked and is actually chainmail?
Yeah.
That's
So Michael,
outrageous.
You can print chainmail. That's interlinked rings. And they're fully interlinked and it's fully maneuverable like chainmail.
And it's light.
And it's light.
Yeah.
And it's strong. So here's my theory. No, we're not training craftspeople the same as we used to, right? And it's everyone, not everyone. I don't want to create a generalization about everyone, but there's lamentation, I think, sometimes about we're not training cutters. We don't have tailors. We don't have people who understand craft the same way that we used to. And so therefore the art form's going to die. We're going to lose tailoring. And I have to call bullshit because I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think again, trying not to generalize, but at the same time, I do think it's a Canadian theater problem right now in the way that we are working, is that we're not embracing technology fast enough. And so, there are great and they are fantastic pattern drafting programs and that other industries are using. And also ways of drawing the human figure in 3 dimensions in the computer and creating 3D models. And we're not keeping up, and we're not keeping up because I think fear of losing craft is getting in the way. And I also think so the money is not following where it needs to go. And that the more we fight to keep craft the same as it's always been, means we're not embracing new technologies. And no, we'll never be. I still teach. So in my costume history class, I do a day of teaching how to knit. Like I do one class of teaching how to knit, because it shows people, young, would-be designers. Okay, so when we talk about the knitted garment, here you go. Put this on and think about historically. When I do a day of beading, I do a class of just beading, and we don't get anything done. Like we don't, nobody's leaving a class of 90 minutes and leaving a beading expert. But it gives them the notion of what does it mean. Okay, so that Renaissance garment we're looking at was hand beaded, right? So it just gives them the thought of it. Because we have this millennial generation who's coming up behind us so fast. It's not that they don't value handcraft. It's that they know there's another way. I have students who are drafting or modeling, not drafting, but modeling complex three-dimensional objects in 6 hours. Like it was that was unthinkable when you and I were learning how to use CAD software for the first time.
Yeah, like I was
in the
late
'90s.
Yeah, I was drawing 3D objects for cast back in the early 2000s even, and they had to be simple because they're live rendered, and so you can't have 12,000 faces on a thing because the computer won't handle it, and it will also take me forever. Plus, I was not a 3D artist.
Yep.
So I don't know how to organically, and yes, it's digital, but there's an organic way of working.
Yep.
To get those shapes out instead of drawing triangles every day. Let the computer do that. I get it. I totally get it. And I also think Jennifer Treemstra, who is running. Starting to get this fact school, down in Blythe, up and running, and has been teaching classes on like lace making and tatting and things like that that are very delicate and an art that not a lot of people do anymore. I get that, and I believe in that process.
Sure.
To maintain that shared knowledge, because how are you going to build a program to build lace unless you know how to build lace?
Yeah.
Right. But by the same token,
But now I can also 3D doodle lace.
exactly.
I can use the 3D doodler.
Right.
And I can actually trace a lace pattern and make 3-dimensional. And now they make stretch ABS. So I can make stretch lace out of, so I think, yes, we want people to learn how to tat. Yeah. Sure. But not everybody's going to want to tat. And quite frankly, we're not tatting in the theater anymore because we're buying it from China. So,
and we got a show to put up.
We've got a show to put up.
I got 2 people, and we open in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
and I just need to get the damn Jacobean collar out the door. And
so I live in this world for myself right now. I find my process is trying to find ways of using technology, and finding shows. The reason why slime was so perfectly fit together in a way was that it was a show about the future. And so it allowed a sort of imagination of, how do we put these, LEDs into these costumes, and why would they be there? Dramaturgically, what's the impetus to do this? But there's other technologies that I think we can embrace, and it will always take another human being in the room to fit a costume. But will it take that human being drafting it by pattern, by pencil and paper to get the first draft done? I don't know. I think, that could also be spit out on a computer. And fitting the human body, we know, is delicate and nuanced work, right? No human body, no 2 bodies are the same. And so that will always need a human touch. That will always need a cutter who understands how the fabric is going around the body, and where's the grain and where's the edge, and, how much ease is there, and all of that. But do they need to draft it by hand anymore? Maybe not. So I think we're just, and fear of losing craft is also preventing us from pushing forward. Yeah. And I think it would be sad if we were held back by fear. Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. Part of me thinks, this is my prepper part of my brain, is that when the world fails, there's a certain amount of knowledge that we have to sort of rebuild.
Yeah.
But that being said, no one's going to be doing.
Well, I did say to the students, well, now that you know how to knit, you'll be able to trade that for meat when the grid goes down.
There's a reason why I'm becoming a physician. Because everyone needs medicine, right? It might be garden medicine, who knows? But yeah, that's terrific. I love that. I love that discussion. And was there anything else? So how'd the production go? So were you happy with the result?
Yes.
And what's happening next?
Yes, I was happy with the result. It went to Vancouver and played in Vancouver. I think Kendra and I have been talking about another project that she's also working on about rain and about water. And so I hope that will come to Calgary at some point. I'm working... World Stage Design is coming to Calgary in 2021, right? And so I'm responsible for bringing that here, and I'm excited about that. But before that comes Performance Studies International, number 25, is coming to Calgary in July. So I don't know, Kendra and I pitched something to try and dabble with rain while we're here, and we'll see. We'll see what happens.
That's great. I think in Canada we do this just because we're a colonial nation. There's a lot of reliance on tradition and I think audience expectations with Stratford Festival, Barton Beach, things like that, where you're like, there's a traditional form of theater that we're used to that we know sells, that we know people are used to and can have a vocabulary to see. But when we look at a lot of international work, I mean, there are different cultural contexts for this work, so it may not be as new and refreshing there as it is here. I remember when the first World Stage Design came here, I was looking at all the other work from all the other countries going, oh my God, why are we not doing this kind of work here? Part of it's money,
Yep.
but that's only an excuse for so long. We have to have ideas and take risks, right?
Yeah, and part of it's aesthetic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited about World Stage Design coming to University of Calgary, and one of our, with CITT and Ian Garrett and Patrick Rosati as well are on this planning committee. We're looking at landscape and storytelling, right? Because Calgary's in this interesting landscape, as you experienced driving to Banff, but also when you drive away from Banff and you come into this foothills area, vast prairie. And so also conversation with the Blackfoot culture that lives here. And so we want to, Sakokoto is a Blackfoot elder I've been working with here for 2 years now, off and on different smaller conversations and projects, but he's agreed to be our elder for this process, and to look, we're talking about going to writing on stone and having designers spend time in landscape and think about what does our own landscape tell us in terms of how does it influence us as designers, right? So when you grow up, like I did, in the middle of the bald Saskatchewan prairie, and, or when you grow up in the mountains, or if you, live by the ocean, or so how does that change? If you live in an urban center in the middle of Europe with millions of people, how does that change your visual aesthetic, your choices, what's interesting to you as a designer?
That's a very good point. I know that as a child, I grew up in the Canadian Shield. In the summers. I had friends up in Parry Sound, and that kind of landscape, Group of Seven and Algonquin Park and that stuff, really, like, that to me has a lot of emotional weight to it.
Sure.
So I can imagine living on the prairies, different experience.
Yeah.
Living in the north, different experience on the tundra, or even like further north, in the mountains. Yeah, I totally get it. I understand how that. It's interesting to explore those ideas, and in fact, not just let them be default. Not just sort of you go, just plumbing my own kind of artistic depths, but I have to understand where I came from and what my aesthetic is in order to move forward.
Well, and allow you to interrogate it a bit, right? Exactly. To kind of go why and how. And I think that would also, I'm excited about going through the process, right? And sort of looking at it and going, seeing how other designers respond, in the sense of looking at, once you're aware of it, what does it change? So I think there's a possibility there to sort of crack open some process for people, and we're also looking at eco-sonography as a part of that conversation with landscape, and Ian Garrett being very, he's our eco-sonography guy in Canada right now. So I think, we've got some exciting plans.
Yeah. That's awesome. I also want to say that I, having gone to Ryerson, which when I went there was a more practical school. Like, it was about producing technical technicians, or completely technical technicians, maybe. Technical directors, lighting designers, sound designers, sound technicians, carpenters, blah, blah, blah. And not a big design focus other than lighting design, led by Shalom Dulgoy. But I always had this kind of disconnect from research and what research means and how that drives the art forward, because it didn't really seem that way. Unlike other fields, research really is at the forefront of creating new ideas and asking new questions and coming up with new answers to things and fleshing out kind of our model of how that world works. In theater, there seems to be there's still an uneasy marriage. But I was speaking to Robert Gardner at UBC, and it was the first time I'd considered, he's trying to make the argument, because from academia, their idea or their priority is producing papers, producing, like doing research, publishing in specific journals, and in theater, which is like a plastic art, where the work that we're producing is not in a journal. It's an experience that we then have an audience for, etc. And that those two things are equivalent or should be equivalent academically. And that has given me more excitement about this kind of work where, like, as long as it can be shared with working artists who are not in the university and push their work forward, or creating or helping train new artists that are then going out into the world and saying, I'm going to do this new thing that we are working on, and University of Calgary has, had that work. So
I think it's interesting because so many thoughts coming to me right now. So the University of Calgary is, maybe not the only one, but it is unique in that it's written right into our tenure and promotion documentation that creative activity and creative works are the equivalent of those papers. And, so there's not really an argument to be made, but there is every day a kind of, when you're talking to traditional scholars, a sort of conversation about what does that mean? Like you kind of have to explain yourself a lot. But I do think, yes, the research aspect of it, if research is the generation of the creation of new knowledge, right? Every production that's not, anarchic is can generate new knowledge. And the difference is that our dissemination method is the work itself, right? And so that, but there are artists right now, and we have a few here that espouse performance as research, right? So looking at performance as a research itself. And so it allows for scholarly publication and performance creation as both scholarly entities, right? Which as a practitioner, I get on many levels. And then as someone who's a practitioner, I don't get on other levels. But, I've published the occasional article, and I'm not opposed to disseminating at conferences. I've done that a fair bit in my role as an academic. But I do think sharing knowledge in conferences and it's really important to me to get students to see new work. So I'm excited about bringing World Stage Design back to Canada. I'm excited every time I take a student to the Prague Quadrennial, even if it's only one student. But, if I can take 6, great. Because it just opens their eyes about the continuum, right? That it's not just what you see in Calgary. It's bigger than that. It's not just what you can see in Canada, right? Like that was part of the excitement about the Magnetic North Festival when it started, right? Was sort of the opportunity to actually see what one thing that came from Newfoundland, see one thing that came from Vancouver that you wouldn't have got to see otherwise, and sort of creating a national identity in a even in a disconnected way, but still in a at least understanding that there's a continuum of work that somehow we're connected.
Yeah. It's sad that it's not continuing. I when it was in Magnorth was in Kitchener, I think. Or Waterloo.
It's got a new life now, right? It's going to be with Push.
Oh, great! Oh, that's terrific.
That's my understanding.
That's awesome.
We should check that. We should verify that fact.
It'll be in the show notes, and this show actually will be aired like in 2020. I don't know when it's going to be out. Like I've got like 7. There's 9 other interviews before this. I'm going to try and get them out earlier. But so this may be out of date by the time we have a conversation. But time people hear it, it strikes me as well that. I was at Banff talking to Matt Flawn, who's the head of lighting there, and we had a chance to sort of duck into their film and TV building.
Right.
And I got a little tour of the studios there from Agostino. Nope, that's not his name. his name will be in the show notes as well. The head technician who runs the whole film department for lighting and video, and we were talking about archival, like what Banff is doing to share their work outside of Banff, because it's a great like incubator for work. And in the past, work was created there and then brought to the rest of the country. Now that funding model has changed, and that may not be the opportunity people have. Certainly with the digital arts, writing music, anything that can be that can be digitized can be shared. But they tried some YouTube, kind of Facebook Live kind of things that didn't get a lot of viewership because people aren't consuming art that way, I guess. And I wonder if there's got to be a way that we can now, with the quality of camera, you don't have to overlight everything to do a video.
Yeah.
You can actually do something archival, maybe multi-camera.
Yeah.
That can capture live events. Just got to be where to share
they're doing
right?
it, right? They're doing the Met's doing it.
Yeah, that's true.
Stratford Festival's doing it.
Yeah. But I mean, that's fine. I mean, I'd love to see a Met show. I'd love to see a Stratford show. I want to see what One Yellow Rabbit is doing.
Oh yeah, I think it's one of those. I don't think we're far from that. I think the millennials are going to take care of that. Yeah. I really do. Yeah. Like, I think in some ways, I have so much hope, with what this generation, of entitled brats is going to come up with. Like, I'm fascinated by them. I'm fascinated by their thinking process. I'm fascinated by their incredible ability to learn, by their empathy, as well as their digital native ability to just find a way to. They've made it a part of their lives, and so. It will come naturally to them, just like breathing, figuring out how to share stuff.
And monetize it, really, because that's what YouTube's all about, right?
Totally will.
Like, how can I create something people are going to watch?
These are savvy individuals.
And judging from the, I'm sorry, garbage and base entertainment stuff that I'm like, I have friends' kids are watching on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I just go, I mean, Saturday morning cartoons weren't much better with content, but at least they had production value. You know what I mean? And
I'm sorry, totally cackling, but yeah, my kid will sit and watch the opening of a Kinder Egg.
Yes.
Right? Repeatedly, because what is it? It's the dopamine hit of what's in the fucking egg. Exactly. Oh my God. And so it can. I've had to explain to my 5-year-old what dopamine is. Right. So I can explain why I'm turning off the iPad.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, my God. Okay, so I share your optimism. I go to school with millennials who are the next generation of physicians and other healthcare professionals, and they're all extraordinary people. And I was not that capable at the age of 23. And, maybe I was in other ways, but I was more interested in, it's Friday night, let's go to the bar. So that's great. Let's talk about the ADC.
Sure. Speaking
of going to the bar, now, you were on the board of ADC. Take me through your journey there, what you think the challenges were.
Okay. So I'll give you a little quick background. So my first experience with ADC was meeting Chuck Homewood. My next experience with ADC was no one answering the phone or email or anything like that. So feeling like I didn't quite belong there, or why the hell would I want to belong there? And then my next experience was with Robert Gardner, very funny, who came to see my thesis production at U of A and said, I'm taking you out to lunch tomorrow. Okay. So I ended up going for coffee and brownies, actually. But anyway, and he said, you need to join ADC. And I said, why on earth would I bother? And he said, if we can't get you, we're fucked. And I said, okay, how does there any benefit for me? He said, is it a question about the fee? And I said, no, I don't think so. And he said, I'll pay your fee For a year, I'll pay your fee. I said, Robert, you don't have to pay my fee. He said, you need to join. And I was like, okay, I'll think about it. But I said to him, if I'm going to join, I need to be on the board, because I'm not just going to join and figure it out. And he said, fine, I'll nominate you for the board. And so he just kept calling my bluff. And so eventually I relented and joined the board. And I had to eat my words, because I was a part of the designers working group with Danny Lynn after her Seminovich speech, and, was adamant that the ADC was old news and not going to do any good. But we learned some hard lessons with the designers working group, right?
Just back up 1 second and tell me how that developed. First of all, just let everyone know what happened with Danny Lynn.
Sure.
Just so we have some continuity.
Sure.
Because we haven't talked about this before on the show.
Okay. So Danny Lynn wins the Seminovich Prize and makes a fairly truthful speech at the Seminovich Prize about the difficulty of being a designer in the contemporary context, and explains about how hard it is to be working at some of the biggest companies in the country and making $3 an hour or $5.50 or whatever she quoted, but it was an obscene number, right? And I think, there's still designers who are pissed off and angry about that speech. And Natalie Riwa published it in a journal article. And some designers I've spoken to will get emblazoned about this speech. And some are really grateful to Danny for making the speech. And some, so love it or hate it, it actually was a catalyst of great change for theater designers in this country. And so, string me up and, beat me with sticks, but it's the truth. And I think that was the catalyst for an alternate group than the ADC, because the ADC had been closed off. They hadn't signed a new member in a decade. And they didn't think they needed to. Right? And so I think what we were seeing was a generational shift that was seismic at that time. So there were very few, Gen Xers in the ADC. There were an awful lot of baby boomers, and the millennials were coming up right on our heels, right? I don't think maybe they were starting to be called millennials then. But
we had like Gen Y or something.
It's Gen Y and Gen something else,
weird.
but
it doesn't matter.
There was another bigger generation coming up behind Gen X, and we knew it was coming. And I think this new group, so Designers Working Group, really wanted to make a difference and wanted to. What was driving it was making better working conditions for designers in the sense of remuneration and being able to have a conversation about what we were getting paid and why we were being paid the way that we were. And also having a conversation about membership and what does membership mean? And why are so many people being excluded from a group that's supposed to be inclusive? And it's not a union, so what the hell? Like, why can't anybody join? Like, so there were lots of questions about that. And that was also shaking a bit of the foundation of why ADC was created and going into the history of that. And, that's a whole other, like, I could spend hours talking about that history. The obstacle for Designers Working Group was two things. ADC had the advantage of being incorporated as a national entity, and also had the ear of PACT. So ADC has the negotiating rights with PACT, right? So the contract says they won't make any other collective agreement with another, with anybody else until this contract folds or is over. And, it automatically renews until we decide it doesn't, right? And both parties have to agree. So designers working group would have been limited and was also, it lost steam when we got to the point of, so do we incorporate? How do we incorporate? Where do we incorporate? Why would we incorporate? And so there was, it just lost momentum. Yeah. And I won't deny that I think there was a certain amount of strong, I'm trying to be polite, but I think, people were afraid of the militancy in some ways of Designers Working Group, of how tough that language was.
Yeah, it's not unusual. The Canadian theatre community is really interesting. There's, for as much as we get pinned as lefty, kind of pinko, sometimes anarchist,
Yep.
as much as that is the myth, it's quite conservative.
Extremely.
And right from the roots of the Me Too movement to colonialism to equal pay.
Yep.
Right. All that stuff. We're still, there are a lot of roots that are tough, that go deep and are tough to pull out of the ground.
Yeah.
And there's not enough work.
Nope.
And we're already precarious, asking for more from the government, from funders, from who are all conservative. I mean, small c, kind of don't want to. There's not a lot of money to go around, so we want to make the best choices.
Yeah.
So when someone says that's not good enough and stands up and actually tries to live up to this lefty, social, democratic kind of ideal,
Feminist,
right? Let's take people who are in power and go, you've had enough now. We're going to put somebody else there. People get freaked out because there's not enough work. Mm-hmm. There's not people's livelihoods, people's homes, people's rent, and everyone's living it's a bit of it's a bad situation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised, especially in 2004, 2008.
That would have been 2006.
2006, just before the housing crisis,
Yep.
post-SARS, post-recession.
Yes.
Everyone's like, what the hell am I going to do now? And now there's this group saying that you're going to pay me more money, and I just want to take the next gig.
Yeah.
So not surprising at all.
And you want to rock the boat. Are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
Don't rock this boat. So that happened in 2006. Designers Working Group had lots of steam for about a year. And then I was in Edmonton. I came back to receive the Simonovich Prize, Protégé Prize, went back home to Edmonton, where I was studying at the time. And then, 2008, met Robert Gardner, who said, you need to join. And he also said that because he knew that I was working with the Designers Working Group, was passionate about things that concern designers. But I wasn't nearly as controversial as Danny Lynn, right? And and Robert and I got along great, and so anyway, eventually I joined, and I had to eat my words. Which my words when I belonged to the Designers Working Group, this is why you never say never, is I had said, and I'll even quote myself, and said, there's no way I'm going to join the ADC. I'm never going to go toe to toe with Phil Silver over arguing about, designers' rights. Well, I had to eat those words, and hard, because not only did I join the board, but Phil was the president. And I don't know how many times he and I went toe to toe. I have great respect for Phil. Sure. And he's actually coming here this week to do a unit review on this drama division. And so I'm, inviting Phil Silver in to critique my drama division. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. I'm looking forward to it. But I also, that that took a lot of courage, right? And Erica Hassel and I and Sheila White on that board, we gave Phil a good run for his money. There were days where I think he'd probably wished he was doing something else, other than arguing with these three very strong-willed women. Yeah. And we did a lot of good in that time. Phil as president, we had Renee Brode, Erica Hassel, myself, Sheila White, Mike Walsh, Wade Staples, a variety of, there might be others that I'm missing, and sorry that I am. But, we brought costume design fees up to par with set design fees. I mean, that was controversial within the organization. There were big fights. There was people pounding on the back of chairs, which for designers to get that excited over something was really remarkable.
I was around when we first did when we had the minimum fee argument in the mid 90s, 97-ish, 96-ish, and maybe 97, 98-ish, because I think they were in negotiations with Ivan Habel, who was on the PACT side.
Yeah.
Erica Hassel's partner.
Yeah.
Which is says everything about Canadian theater. They're both lovely people. I love them both. And no one had run the math. Everyone knew the costume designers were getting hosed, and largely women. Mm-hmm. And then we looked at all the numbers and agreed to make it public, at least for the membership. And we're always like, well, damn, how the hell do we get costume designers paid more? Everyone's afraid about taking a cut. Everyone's afraid of their fees going down. Yeah. To that's
so the biggest challenge with minimum fees was that they were never written in stone. Yeah. And so we also made that happen, right? And so they got locked in. Yeah. Still controversial, still hear about it today. However, so in the last round of negotiations, I spent a year. Yeah. Michael, I spent a year running the numbers. And so taking all the fee data and looking at what's happening to the floor. Right? So was the floor actually going up? Right. The floor was actually going up. Was the top coming down? No. The fact is that there was less work. Right. So the floor is not coming down. The floor is going up. And the top was also still going up. The problem was the minimum fees hadn't changed enough. Right. And so Gail Packwood started at the office shortly before this last negotiation. And she found a letter that Sholem Dolgoy had written in 1998. I have it here somewhere. On this fabulous brown and harvest gold letterhead from the ADC that listed the original minimum fees. Yeah. And they weren't really that different. Right. So Simon Rossiter, who happens to be an Excel spreadsheet whiz kid, also was looking at the tail end of this as we're getting closer and closer to negotiation. Yeah. So we do this look, and Sholem Dolgoy has been my guide through most of this. I've been ever since I became president of ADC for those last 4 years, Sholem was on my speed dial. And I'd be like, Sholem, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so he'd say, well, do this, do that. And oh yeah, great, brilliant. So he was quite interested in what was going to happen with this negotiation. So we looked at the fees. We looked at where the minimums were. We looked at what was happening at the top end. So what was happening is that the minimum recommended fee was too low. Essentially, the problem is that the minimum fees were way too low. Yeah. And we all knew that. This is not rocket science. I didn't discover how they get the caramel into the Cadbury bar. I had just found the math to prove it. And so what we did is we took the letter. We did two things. We hired Lucy White, who was an executive director at PACT for a number of years. And we paid the best amount of I won't name her fee on the radio, but on the podcast. But the best money ADC's ever spent in a consultant's fee, and talk to her for an hour and a half on the phone with a group of designers and negotiators that were going to go to the negotiations of the pact. And she advised that the best thing we could do was to approach the question of fees with the fairness argument, and that is the only argument that ever appeals to pact, because they are a lowest common denominator organization. So the unionization argument scares the hell out of them, but it won't necessarily affect the fees, right? Because we've been down that argument with them as well. And it does scare them, but that's not necessarily the result you want. You don't necessarily want them scared. You want them collaborating. So she said, go with the argument of fairness. Go with the argument of, how are you going to sustain the younger generation? How are new Canadians going to get into the theater if they can't make a living? So have that conversation with them. Yeah. So we did. We had that conversation. We brought that up. We talked about it. But we also brought the letter from Sholem and said, and these were the fees in 1998 or 96 or whatever it was. And look at how much they've changed. And then we showed them, if it had increased by inflation, this is where Simon's WizKid skills came in. If it increased by inflation, where would we be? If the fees from the 1990s were increased by inflation up to now. And we said, so this is where we need to be just to meet inflation. And then the other thing we did is we offered them a 5-year plan as opposed to a 3-year plan, which means that they don't have to negotiate with us for 5 years instead of in 3 years, which also allows them being packed and producers, to absorb these increases in fees over a granting cycle. Oh, right. Because the granting cycles are 3 years.
That is clever.
So that's how we got the buy-in. Yeah. So we're seeing, for the first time ever, an increase in base fee, because I would prefer to call it base fee other than minimum fee, because I don't think minimum applies. I think it's a base. But an increase in base fees, especially for sound designers, projection designers, of like 72% over 5 years. Who's making 72% over 5 years? Nobody, except Canadian sound designers who are ADC members. So we also did a comparison, and the data's not complete, between the Designers Guild data that was collected and the ADC data that was collected. And if I had to sum that up in 2 words, it would be membership pays, because ADC designers are making more by those stats. So I know those stats are incomplete.
I was also going to say, isn't there there's a certain top tier of designers in ADC that are the A-level designers who are all making the top fees? N'est-ce pas? I mean...
yes and no. So I'll explain it to you this way. So once you've made $50,000 in design fees, right, you will receive back a check from ADC that reimburses you right over the cap. So to hit the cap in filing fees, right, the 2% per contract, right, once you've made $50K, you've hit the $1,000, right? So, but I can tell you, as having been president for 4 years and having been the one signing that check, well, actually longer than that, signing the check, because I was vice president before that, it's not the same designers every year. Right. And there's a handful. Yeah. Like, I've never signed more than 8 checks in reimbursement. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So, but they're not the same 8.
No, but it also says a lot about how much money people are making in ADC contracts. Yeah. Right? They're probably making money doing other things. There's independent projects, there's commercial work, there's
commercial work, there's film, there's corporate events, there's assisting work. I mean, that's how I paid my rent in Toronto, right? I assisted everybody and their dog. Mm-hmm. And I did corporate work, and in that time of the Designers Working Group, where Danny actually collected the name of 500 people in the country who self-declared them, as theater designers. A lot of the current ADC members would look at the list and go, but they're not working as a designer exclusively. And that was the sort of snobby reaction. But quite frankly, there are very few who aren't taking dressing calls, who aren't also, pulling a union call every now and then, or working as an arts administrator, or
running a console at a commercial show or whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, they design carpets as well on the side. So effing what? There are very few, and a lot of those who would say things like that would be academics. Drive me crazy, because you go, well, yeah, but you're not making a living just as a designer. You're also, you're working at an institution. Actually, your full-time gig is not designing. Right. It's teaching. Yeah. ADC is an interesting entity in Canadian theater, but yeah, it saddens me to think about the history where there was that time where no one was answering the phone. And I think, designers, Lorenzo's got a great story about that too, about, having been voted in as a member and then never getting the notification. I just think times have changed quite a bit. It's a new kind of organization.
Yeah. I remember waiting for my stamp.
Oh, God.
That I never got.
I got the last stamp.
What? I never got a stamp.
I got the last one.
I never, ever got one. I was there 96, 7.
Yep.
I joined. 98 maybe. Nope, never got a stamp. But I was also working in digitally, so I was just like, I would just put the
logo on.
Yeah.
I'm also the last member who went through the portfolio review.
Right. Okay, so that's interesting. So I remember the portfolio reviews, and when we're talking about this kind of like this exclusive club thing, I had a couple of different thoughts. So one is ADC was touting. One of the points about ADC when it started was about setting a minimum level of minimum standard of ability to communicate. Paperwork, the system, whatever you use to be able to, like, when you hire ADC designer, you should be able to get a plot. That's in the lighting design world. A plot, all the schedules, the section, all that stuff. If you're a costume designer, you're getting all the renderings, you're doing the buying, whatever it is. And then because there were people at the time who were like showing up with napkins, or pointing, which happened all the time with lighting, or whatever, or like all the other things you can do, but that. And so that was the point of the portfolio review. But on the other hand, there was also this kind of like, what is the minimum standard? Mm-hmm. Is that good enough? And I remember at Shaw we had a conversation about, what if we don't put all the information on the plot? What if it's just a bunch of fixtures with a number on each one, and then you correlate that with the paperwork? Like, why do we have to do this grand, like, Baroque thing that is important to us?
I love it, Baroque.
But the head electrician is going to go cut it all up and go and highlight it and go, I only need to know what fixture goes where and what the scale is, and then I'm going to do everything else with the paperwork. And so, yes, it was a minimum standard, an appropriate minimum standard, and were people not getting in because they, I don't know, didn't have the portfolio to show? Like,
so it depends who you talk to, but the big argument, this was one of my toe-to-toe moments, was, why do we have the portfolio review? What's the advantage to the association of the portfolio review? And the reason why the portfolio review historically came in, so there was the question of standards between designers, but it was PACT that wanted the portfolio review. But they wanted a way for ADC to justify the negotiation with PACT. And so to be able to say, you hire an ADC designer, you're going to get X, Y, and Z. But what PACT never reciprocated was an exclusivity clause. So we'll only hire ADC designers because we're guaranteed to get X, Y, and Z. So they treated us like a union when they wanted to, but they didn't respect us as a union when they didn't want to. So so my argument there is the reason you need to get rid of the portfolio review was because it was acting as a hindrance for membership. So people who had been working in the industry for 20 years or 10 years or even 5 didn't want to go through the portfolio review because they knew they could communicate well enough. Yeah. And who was anybody that ADC was going to put on a committee tell them that they weren't doing a good job? Because they're getting hired.
Plus, it's kind of a pain in the ass. I mean,
it's kind of a pain in the ass.
Like I remember spending, I mean, it was gathering stuff and I was putting it all together, but like I got 3 shows, I'm going to the city.
I had been designing for 18 years.
Yeah.
When I put and then the hurdle was they wanted costume plots. And so I ended up sending 12 and said, is that enough for you now? Kind of, feeling like an absolute smartass. But so my point was that, ADC is using the portfolio review, and the only thing that it's done is become a hurdle to attracting new members. Yeah. And if we have more members, we have more power. Yeah. And so, then there was a lot of questions. Phil had as president had lots of questions. It was sort of going, so how do we justify the fact that we've gotten rid of the portfolio review? And I said, I don't think they'll give a shit one way or the other because they're not adhering to it. Yeah. So you give us exclusivity and we'll put the portfolio review back in. And we'll let them know that, and we took the portfolio review out and PACT hasn't cared less, right? Other designers have mentioned, oh, wow, how are we maintaining our standards? Well, we've just republished. There's a brand new standards booklet, right? Hot off the press this year with the standards of communication that's been updated for digital technologies and things like that. And so we still communicate with each other about what's good practice, what's useful, what's not useful, and those are guidelines. They're not, no one can tell any designer, you must render in this particular method, right? If I want to do, my costume sketches as sculptures out of orange peels, then that's my business. And if the theater wants to hire me to do that, that's their business.
I was going to say, and everyone gets to do that once. And then next year, right, when Director X comes back and goes, don't hire Cruz again. He did his damn thing in orange peels. Well, and then you're done.
My favorite complaint from PACT so far has been, it's lovely. Well, this designer handed in drafting that didn't have any measurements on it. And I said, okay, well, did you pay them? Yeah, we did. Well, that's your own problem. You have the biggest incentive in your hands, right? I could chase them as the president of ADC and tell them they have to put measurements on their drawings, but that will do no good. No. But you have a paycheck, so don't give him the paycheck till he puts the dimensions on the drawing.
Exactly. There's a deadline, and it's in the like the first. When the design deadline is due, you get a check.
Yeah.
Just don't give them the check.
I bet you the dimensions would go on that drawing in a heartbeat.
And then if you delay it, the check, when it's late, the next time, it's going to be on time. Otherwise, you don't get paid.
Yeah.
Like, I understand people getting late, and you can negotiate that. Like, I've got a thing, I'm going to be 2 days.
Pick up the phone and make a phone call.
It's fine. But, if you got 16 carpenters waiting to build a thing and you're 2 days late, well, your check's going to be 2 days late too. Or you're going to have a penalty. You can negotiate a penalty within the contract, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's other ways to do that than just have us police our own members about.
Well, and what are they going to say to me? Yeah. I'm going to call them and say, you need to put dimensions on your drawing or you won't get paid. Or I'm just going to say, you need to put dimensions on your drawing because you're embarrassing the ADC. Somebody will just flip me the bird. Like, that's it's not going to fix anything.
Exactly. Okay, so that's great. I'm so happy to hear all of those things about the ADC, and I think that the Designers Guild on Facebook, which has about 650 or 700 members.
Oh yeah.
Now, I'm glad that everyone's working together on this. I had a big conversation with Connor Moore in Vancouver about this over the holidays. That'll be that people will have already heard that interview by the time they're hearing from you. So this is again something we're trying to do here. Thank you so much for doing this today. We're now like 100 hours into the interview, and people are on their like 7th day of listening to this in their car on their commute to work or wherever they're doing. But it sounds like you've got a hell of a lot of optimism.
I do.
About the future. The kids here at University of Calgary sound like they're inspiring.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I worked in Edmonton. Literally, well, I was at the Mayfield in 2012, I think, with Ron, our buddy Ron Jenkins, and then before that, Black Rider. And Edmonton was a great place to be. Calgary has been a terrific place to hang out for the week. I mean, I've been doing other things, not the arts, but it's an extraordinary place, Alberta. And there's a lot of stigma, I think, especially these days with the pipelines and Jason Kenney and like a lot of crap going on in this province that, I mean, Ontario, we can't throw shade because we have our own problems with our own ridiculous premier. But, like it sounds like a great place to make art.
I think it is. Right? I think Calgary loves to live up to its maverick reputation in lots of ways, and likes to use that as a sort of calling card in a kind of way. But there's lots of new work happening in Alberta, in Calgary. There's a new theater company in Lethbridge, this small town. I think Albertans love theater, and Alberta is an interesting province also because of its size. But you have to think, there are two cities of about 1 million people, Edmonton and Calgary, and they're 2.5 hours apart. And artists go back and forth, not as much as you'd imagine, but they do go back and forth. And, we have 3 A houses in this province alone. Yeah. Toronto's got 1, really, can stage, when they're at the Bluma. Whereas, Theatre Calgary, Citadel's got 2 A houses, plus some smaller ones. So there's a lot of work that's happening here. And then we have the BAM Center. Yeah. So, and we have some pretty amazing schools in Alberta. So, U of A with its conservatory style programs, its liberal arts program, U of C here with our liberal arts program and our MFA program and the research focus. And, Lethbridge, Red Deer, and McEwen. Mm-hmm. So, cranking out lots of eager technicians. I've never met a technician who's trained at Red Deer College that I haven't loved. Have never, had a bad experience working with. I did a few shows at McEwen not that long ago, and had a great time working with their students. An army of technicians, and being interviewed there, where the production manager at the time said, "I don't need any of this minimalist crap. I need scenery, and I got 30 students. I got to build it. Just bring on the scenery.
More molding.
More molding. So I ended up
I want a chair rail, I want a picture rail, I want a crown molding, I want cornice molding.
The design there had so much scenery they couldn't build it all. So the false pros got cut at the end because they just couldn't deal. So it was brilliant. But I just, I think there's a can-do kind of spirit in Alberta, no matter where you are. And it's refreshing, and I love it.
That's terrific. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the Title Block.
Thanks, Michael.
Awesome. That was designer April Viczko talking to me from the Department of Drama at the University of Calgary in February 2019. Next time, a chat with lighting and live event designer Robert Sondergaard. The music for this podcast is by Vern Good, with voiceover by Gabriel Cropley. Please go to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. It'll help get the word out about this podcast and share the history of theater design in Canada. And you can follow us on Twitter at thetitleBlockCA and on Facebook.com/The Title Block Podcast. You can send comments and requests by email to thetitleBlock@gmail.com. And don't forget that if you like this show, please support us on Patreon.com. Feel free to share this with your friends, colleagues, students, and teachers, or listen to it while you frantically search your active contracts for the language around billing. I'm Michael Cruz, and I'll see you next time on The Title Block. Okay, we'll talk
And one
about
of my
that.
very first things in Toronto was assisting Cameron Porteous on Michael's exhibit at the Harbourfront Centre.
as an
assistant curator.
Yeah.
I was putting grommets into plastic, but whatever, that's what they called me. That's fine. And I was responsible for Michael Levine's sketchbooks. So I had instructions,
Whoa,
right?
yeah.
I had just moved to Toronto. Like, I had only been to Toronto maybe 6 months. And Michael gave me instructions to meet Victoria Wallace.
Yeah.
So I meet Victoria Wallace. I also assisted Victoria at Stratford once.
Nice.
Anyway, so I took all these sketchbooks from Victoria and had them in this office. I was working for Fireworks Marketing Group as well. It's kind of my day job.
Yeah.
Doing big corporate events. And I had Michael's sketchbooks in my office there. And at one point I left and they were all in garbage bags because that was all we had to put them in.
Right.
Because they were so heavy and so many of them and it was raining or something. Anyway, so Victoria gave me some garbage bags. I came back and somebody had moved the garbage bags and I just yeah, my whole career flashed in front of my eyes. Anyway, so they were quickly removed from garbage bags, and so that people knew what they were.
Yeah. That's a good tip. Don't store crap in garbage bags.
Don't store
'cause people will
important
throw it
stuff in garbage bags. So,
God.
you know, and then I had this paranoia of like, what if somebody steals them? How am I gonna? Yeah. Anyway,
God.
sort of like carrying around the geniuses sketchbooks, right?
Yeah,
But
indeed.
it was an amazing experience because I got to look through all of these sketchbooks. And understand Michael Levine's process a bit.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
That's terrific. You've worked with Ronnie Jenkins,
Yes, and I love working with Ron Jenkins.
my hero.
I love working with Ron Jenkins.
He called me. I was in Vancouver, and I was interviewing Scott Miller, who runs DWD Design now,
Yeah.
and for about theater consulting.
Wait, my phone's gonna die. Yeah.
And FaceTime goes off. No one ever FaceTimes me. Yeah. Who FaceTimes people? Not me. No. Children FaceTime each other. And I'm like, who's FaceTiming me? And there's like Ron Jenkins' mug. Hey, Cruzy. What are you doing? Yeah. I'm like, I'm in the middle of an interview. I'm interviewing. Here's Scott Miller. Oh, you don't know Scott Miller? Yeah. You should come to the East Coast. I'm like, why am I coming to the East Coast? We're going to do Greece. It's like, I can't do Greece. I'm in med school, right? I don't have 2 weeks where I can do Greece. I don't have 5 days I can do Greece. If I had 5 days to do Greece, that's where I would do it with him.
With him, right? Oh,
But-
I would walk on glass
Oh, like, come on.
to work with Ron Jenkins.
So
Yeah.
much fun. And I
worries.
was in Ottawa with Peter Hinton, Winston Morgan, and myself.
Fun.
And we all went out drinking one night. And we're exactly 10 years apart.
Oh, fun.
I'm 10 years younger than Peter, and Winston was 10 years older than Peter. And it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and Peter and Winston, I was just along for the ride, really. I'm like, I've never been to Ottawa. They're like, let's go to Hull, because the bars are open until whenever. There's got to be a gay bar in Hull. We're like, I was like, okay, let's go. Like,
Sure.
I can't believe I'm going to go to Hull and drink at some sort of
With these two theater
with these
icons.
two theater icons. And Winston was a
Isn't that
doll.
funny?
Like, crazy.
I never got to meet Winston. I've only ever heard of Winston, and I've heard so many stories about Winston and know so many people who were mentored by Winston, but I never actually had the privilege.
Yeah, he's a remarkable man. He was a remarkable man.